So everybody, as you can see behind me, we have the brand new M4 iPad Pro with the new Magic Keyboard, but then alongside of that, I do have my M1 iPad Pro with the older Magic Keyboard, and what I want to do in this video is compare the two because they do look very similar at face value, but they do have some key differences that I want to talk about. So we're going to go over all the specs of all the differences, as well as all the different use cases that it now gives you with the new updates to the new Magic Keyboard, and definitely stay subscribed because I'm still formulating my overall review on the M4 iPad Pro, but if you want the synopsis, I absolutely love it, but I also loved my M1 iPad Pro, so depending on who you are, the M4 could or could not be for you. But without further ado, let's talk about the Magic Keyboards and the differences and whether or not I recommend picking one up. Let's get into it. So the name of the game for this new updated M4 iPad Pro in general has been to reduce the weight, reduce the thickness, so it does give you some sense of portability, because with the older iPad Pros from 2018 to the M2 iPad Pro and that old Magic Keyboard, it is a relatively hefty device overall, even weighing more than something like an M2 MacBook Air. So Apple did want to double down on the thinness and lightness because it's technically a tablet first, and tablets are supposed to be more portable than, let's say, a laptop itself. So I know why Apple's going for this thinness and this lightweight construction. But to give you guys a comparison in terms of the weight of just the Magic Keyboards alone without the iPads, the old Magic Keyboard weighed in at 710 grams versus the new Magic Keyboard weighs in at 662 grams, which gives you about a difference of 50 to 55 grams overall, which you do feel when you hold them side by side. Now, if you're not holding them alongside each other and you've never felt one under the other one, then it's not going to be a crazy lightweight feeling or anything like that, but if you do hold them side by side, you do feel the differences in weight. And then when you include the weight of the iPad Pro for the corresponding Magic Keyboards, the older one, when you combine it with the M2 iPad Pro or older, it's going to weigh 1,351 grams or nearly 3 pounds, about 2.98 pounds. Whereas the new M4 iPad Pro, which that 5.1 millimeter thickness, alongside the brand new Magic Keyboard, that's going to come in weighing in on 1,241 grams, which is about 2.74 pounds, which does put it at the same level as the 13-inch M2 MacBook Air, which that weighs 2.7 pounds. So now you're kind of in the same realm of lightweight and portability, and you do have the option to remove the tablet completely or remove the iPad from the Magic Keyboard, and the new M4 iPad Pro is going to weigh in at 579 grams. So that alone is a very lightweight package if you do want to move around that way. And I am exclusively talking about the 12.9 and the 13-inch sizes. Obviously, if you go with the older Magic Keyboard but for the smaller 11-inch iPad Pro, or again, the smaller Magic Keyboard for the new 11-inch iPad Pro, then it's going to be lighter in weight, but I am sticking to the 13-inch because that's the one that I've always used. So now when it comes to thickness, this is also where you're going to start to feel a big difference, because now that the M4 iPad Pro is 5.1 millimeters in thickness, it is relatively smaller and thinner than the older iPad Pros. That is going to actually have the same effect when it is connected to the Magic Keyboard. So with the older 13-inch iPad Pro and the older Magic Keyboard, in total thickness, when you do put it together, it's about 15 millimeters, which again is thicker than something like the MacBook Air. And even though Apple hasn't released the actual thickness of the new Magic Keyboard, we can kind of measure it ourselves and see that it is basically the same exact thickness of an M2 or M3 MacBook Air, which is about 11.5 millimeters in thickness. Now, I did take the new M4 iPad Pro out into the wild and used it inside of a car and was able to edit video, and you can tell overall that it is just a much easier package to move around. Now, I'm not going to say that the extra maybe 0.25 pounds of lightness and the 20% reduction in thickness is going to be night and day, but it is giving you a tangible feeling that it is lighter and it's easier to move around versus something that's a little bit thicker and a little bit more robust that's a little bit annoying to maybe take out of your bag over and over again. So again, it's not going to make or break a decision for me depending on which iPad I'm going with, but it is nice to know that the new M4 iPad Pro is lighter and thinner even when it is in a total package with the Magic Keyboard itself. So now that we got all the numbers and the specs out of the way in terms of how big it is and how much it weighs and things like that, I do want to talk about the actual differences in feature sets and then also in terms of material choices, because it does look a little bit different. Now, if you do have them side by side and they are folded down, from the top down they look pretty much identical except for the actual hinge itself. It's a little bit more ovally and it's actually made out of aluminum as opposed to that rubbery material. But from the top down and also on the bottom of the Magic Keyboard on the new one, it still has that same kind of rubberized soft touch material that the old Magic Keyboard had that Apple is very well known for. But the first thing that you see in terms of differences is that the hinge is made out of aluminum, and also the hinge is more of an oval shape as opposed to a circular shape on the old Magic Keyboard. And then where the keyboard and the trackpad are, that entire new Magic Keyboard is made out of aluminum, which gives it a big bridge keyboard vibe. If you guys have ever dealt with bridge keyboards before, they were making iPad keyboards way back in the day, and they were supposed to mimic the actual feeling of a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air, and this does exactly that. So it does give you a much more familiar feeling if you are coming from a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro and I think Apple did that intentionally so people don't feel like they're using a completely separate device. And alongside those changes to the aluminum material, we do get a larger trackpad, which is great to have. Now, I'm somebody that used the trackpad the way that you would use a trackpad on your iPad, because I would use the trackpad on the older Magic Keyboard, more so for gestures or things like that. So yes, the old Magic Keyboard did have a relatively small trackpad, but you kind of don't notice it because you don't use it the same way that you use a trackpad on a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro. You don't really use it for point and click situations. You do a little bit, but I use it mostly for gestures, so it's kind of an extension of the screen. And whenever I want to point and click, quote unquote, I would actually use my finger to actually touch the screen of the iPad Pro because it is a tablet and it is a touchscreen first interface. And this is kind of how I've been using it in my workflow. And then let me know if you want a video of how I actually physically use my iPad Pro, because there are multiple ways now to interact with that thing. But even though I am saying that, the new larger trackpad is welcome because it gives you a little bit more surface area. I would say that the new trackpad is about 50% the size of the old trackpad. So again, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to point and click. And then another thing that I noticed is that the click on it does give you haptic feedback, and it is much quieter than the old Magic Keyboard. The old Magic Keyboard also gave you a clicky feedback, and it wasn't a dive board design. You could click anywhere on the actual trackpad itself, but the click was actually very intense and you could hear it from a mile away essentially. Versus this one, since it is relying on haptics, very similarly to the Magic Trackpad or the trackpad on the actual MacBook Air, the noise that it gives out is a much smaller and less intense thud, and it does work extremely well, so that's something to take into consideration. And then of course with the keyboard, we finally got some chiclet style half-side keys in terms of a function row. So we do have 14 new keys on the function row, which gives you all the necessary shortcuts that we've had before. For instance, being able to mute, putting up and down the volume, pausing and playing, igniting a spotlight surge, turning on Siri, and things like that. So that function row is extremely welcome, and I'm happy that Apple included that with the new Magic Keyboard. Now, both of these Magic Keyboards come in two different colorways. You have the black version and then the silvery/white version. They are different colors in terms of the new ones versus the old ones. Like the new one is more space blacky versus kind of space gray on the older Magic Keyboard, and then the new white Magic Keyboard is more silvery to kind of coincide with the new color of the iPad Pro, versus it is a true white color for the older ones. And then in terms of these Magic Keyboards, when they are being used and they are being used with the iPad Pro, the only real difference that I've noticed is that the new Magic Keyboard gives you a little bit more in terms of viewing angles. You can push it back just a tad bit more. But the second thing that I noticed is Apple kind of moved the iPad Pro a little bit further back, and I think this was to kind of make it easier for the actual function row keys to show up and things like that. But it is sitting a little bit farther back as opposed to the old Magic Keyboard. If you see from this side angle, it is actually pushed a little bit forward, and I think the reason Apple did that previously was to still entice people to use it as a touchscreen, but now Apple's moving it back a little bit more because they want the iPad to feel more maybe laptop-y when it is docked on the Magic Keyboard. And then one thing I do wish that Apple brought to the new Magic Keyboard was that port that they added on the actual hinge itself would actually supply some data pass-through, but as of right now, both the old and the new Magic Keyboard support 18 watts of power pass-through, but neither of them support any sort of data pass-through. And then in terms of compatibility, as of right now, the new Magic Keyboard only works with the M4 iPad Pro in both the 11 and the 13-inch sizes, and then of course, the old Magic Keyboard works with all the older iPad Pros from the 2018 all the way to the M2 iPad Pro, and then obviously it works with the M2 iPad Air because that's how Apple's selling it, because as of right now, if you go to buy the old Magic Keyboard, it's only being shown with the M2 iPad Air, although of course it still works with the older iPad Pros that Apple no longer sells. So unfortunately, if you do pick up a brand new M4 iPad Pro, it will not work with the older Magic Keyboard. Technically, if you line up the pin connectors correctly, it will work, but the magnets aren't aligned, so it won't hold itself off. So you would have to like hold it with one hand and then type it with the other hand if you really want to push it that way. But it isn't really compatible with the older Magic Keyboard, which is a shame because Apple wants us to spend another $350 for the new Magic Keyboard, while also giving us zero ability to trade in the old accessories to help subsidize the price of a new one. So Apple, if you're hearing this, it would be great if we could actually trade in our old Apple Pencil and trade in our old Magic Keyboard, even if it is for maybe a 20% or 30% off coupon, because it would just help out for the purchasing price when buying a new $350 Magic Keyboard. But I will say that the older Magic Keyboards, even though they are retailed at $350 on Apple's website, if you go on Amazon, you can find it for maybe $270 or $280 brand new, and even much less in a renewed fashion of about $150 to $180 for the Magic Keyboard. The last question that I do want to ask yourselves and also ask myself is, would I actually upgrade to the new Magic Keyboard if the old Magic Keyboard was compatible with the new iPad Pro? And my short answer is I really don't think that I would, because I was never really missing the function row. The trackpad, like I mentioned, I wasn't really using the trackpad as a point and click solution. It was more so for gestures, and I never really wanted or yearned for a bigger trackpad, although I did mention that it is a welcome new update. And the aluminum finish, while being very nice and very cool, it doesn't add any sort of function or anything like that. It's purely for aesthetic reasons. And then the combination of a lighter M4 iPad Pro with the same weighted Magic Keyboard, it probably wouldn't add that much bulk. Like you guys saw, there's only a 50-gram difference between the old Magic Keyboard and the new Magic Keyboard. So if push comes to shove and Apple allowed me to use my old Magic Keyboard, I would have held on to my $350 and just used the old Magic Keyboard instead of upgrading it to a new one. So leave a comment down below if you guys feel the same way. It's in typical Apple fashion, they're trying to get as much money out of you as possible by saying it's only compatible, when in reality, they did it on purpose because all they did was change where the magnets were so it wouldn't align with the old Magic Keyboard, which is very unfortunate. But leave a comment down below about what you think. If you guys made it to the end of the video, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end of the video. And be sure to check out our channel memberships down below. I'll link it for you guys to check out. We've been doing some awesome wallpapers as well as some live streams and things like that for you guys to check out. So definitely join the community if you want to. But if you guys want to watch more videos like this one, click on one of these right here and stay tuned for more iPad Pro content coming your way, because I got a lot of thoughts on it. Honestly, mostly good, but some other things that you guys really should consider. Peace, everybody.